I've noticed something pretty paradoxical. The higher prices go, the more people start making money decisions based on emotion instead of logic. It's not that they lack information. It's not that they lack effort. They get pulled into a very specific psychological state. It's the state of feeling threatened. When you walk into a grocery store and everything costs more. When you look at your electricity bill and have to double-check it. When the same amount of money fills a smaller cart. Your brain isn't just registering numbers, it's registering a loss of control. And when people feel out of control, they usually do one of two things. They either spend more to soothe themselves, or they cut back aggressively and burn out quickly. What's interesting is that neither reaction actually helps money stick around longer. I've watched a lot of financial behavior during rising price periods, and I realized something. The problem isn't the prices. The problem is how we respond to them. In this video, I'm not talking about saving hacks. I want to talk about adjusting your mindset so your money doesn't get swept away by invisible pressure. Because during inflation, the winner isn't the smartest person. It's the calmest one. Idea 1. The feeling of losing value makes you spend the wrong way. I've noticed a very interesting pattern. When prices go up, many people start feeling like their money is worth less, not because their income dropped, but because the same dollars buy fewer things. And when the brain senses loss of value, it triggers a subtle reaction. If money is losing value, why hold on to it? Most people don't realize that this thought alone makes them spend faster. Here's a normal, everyday example. You get paid like usual. But at the grocery store, you feel irritated because everything costs more. On your way home, you treat yourself to something you don't really need, not because you need it, but because you want to regain a sense of control. Here's what people rarely see. When people feel their assets are being eroded, they shift from a protection mindset to a consumption mindset. It's almost like thinking, if money isn't as strong as before, I might as well use it now. But the reality is the opposite. In a high-price environment, the greatest value of money isn't immediate purchasing power, it's flexibility. A calm person thinks, higher prices don't make my money useless. They just require me to use it more selectively. A panicked person thinks, my money is weakening. I need to use it before everything gets even more expensive. Those two mindsets lead to completely different financial paths. Inflation doesn't make people poor overnight, but reacting poorly to inflation absolutely can. Idea 2. When everything gets more expensive, your brain starts comparing the wrong things. I've noticed a subtle shift in how people make decisions when prices rise. They stop asking, do I really need this? And they start asking, which one is cheaper? That sounds reasonable. But when your entire focus shifts to cheaper, you accidentally ignore the more important question, is this purchase necessary at all? Most people don't realize inflation distorts their reference points. Maybe before, you wouldn't buy something for $20 because it didn't feel worth it. But when everything else around it has gone up, $20 suddenly feels acceptable by comparison. That's what I call shifting standards. When the general price level rises, your internal benchmark quietly rises too. And you don't feel like you're spending more. You just feel like you're adjusting. I once watched a friend who used to be very disciplined with money. When coffee, eating out, and services all became more expensive, he started saying, well, everything's expensive now. I'll just pick something reasonable. The problem is, reasonable during high price periods can still be unnecessary. Here's what's interesting. If you only optimize within the available options, you're still inside the consumption loop. A different way to think would be, instead of asking, which one is cheaper? Ask, is there a way not to buy this at all? Or can I delay this decision? The difference between someone who controls money and someone who gets led by prices shows up right here. One person compares within the group of options, the other steps outside the group. Inflation makes options more expensive, but distorted comparison is what makes total spending expand. Idea 3. High prices drain your energy. And when you're tired, you spend to stop thinking. I've realized something not many people talk about. Rising prices don't just affect your wallet, they exhaust your brain. Every purchase requires more calculation, more comparison, more evaluation. Individually, these decisions seem small, but repeated daily, they create what's known as decision fatigue. Most people don't realize that when the brain gets tired, it prioritizes simplicity. And simplicity in spending usually looks like one of two things: either buying quickly just to get it over with, or choosing the familiar option even if it costs more. Here's a very normal example. After a long workday, you stop by the store. Meat, vegetables, pantry items, all more expensive than before. You compare for a few minutes and then feel mentally drained. So you choose the fastest option, prepared food or takeout. Not because you don't know how to cook, but because you don't have the energy to keep calculating. Inflation doesn't just take your money, it takes your mental energy. And when energy drops, the quality of decisions drops too. I've seen people with stable incomes still struggle during high price periods. They didn't lose money because their income went down. They lost money because they were too tired to evaluate small decisions consistently. So the people who manage money well during inflation aren't the ones who calculate more. They're the ones who reduce how often they need to calculate. They standardize meals. They limit choices. They use consistent lists. Not to be rigid, but to protect their energy. Because when energy is preserved, decisions become sharper. And in a high-price environment, clarity matters more than cleverness. Idea 4. When you fear prices will rise even more, you start buying the future. I've noticed a very common reaction when prices climb. People start thinking about the future more pessimistically. Next month will probably be worse. If I don't buy now, it'll cost more later. I'll just stock up to feel safe. It sounds logical. But what's interesting is that most buy ahead just in case. Decisions aren't driven by real need. They're driven by anxiety. Most people don't realize that when they stock up out of fear, they're paying for their worry. Here's a simple example. You see cooking oil prices rise. You decide to buy double what you normally would. Next week, another item increases in price. You buy extra again. Each decision seems reasonable on its own, but together, your cash reserves shrink faster than expected. What's interesting is this. When you convert cash into goods purely out of fear, you're trading flexibility for temporary peace of mind. And in uncertain environments, flexibility is one of your greatest assets. I've observed people who constantly buy ahead just in case. They often feel short on money, not because they earn less, but because their money is locked into rushed decisions. A calmer person asks a different question. If I don't buy extra, what's the worst that could realistically happen? Very often the answer is nothing serious. Price increases are a variable, but panic reactions are what truly tighten cash flow. During inflation, maintaining liquidity and flexibility can matter more than trying to outsmart every future price change. Idea 5. When everything gets more expensive, you start confusing stability with upgrading. I've noticed a quiet pattern. When prices rise, many people start thinking like this: if I'm already paying more, I might as well upgrade. It sounds reasonable. But this is exactly where spending begins to drift off course. Most people don't realize inflation only raises prices. It doesn't automatically require you to upgrade your lifestyle. Here's a very normal example. Your electricity bill goes up. You start thinking about buying new energy-efficient appliances. Food prices increase. You switch to premium brands because, if it's already expensive, I might as well eat better. Rent goes up. You consider moving somewhere nicer because it's almost the same price now anyway. Individually, each decision sounds logical, but together, your total spending rises not just because of inflation, but because your standard of living quietly moved up. What's interesting is that in high-price environments, the feeling of being ripped off pushes people to compensate by upgrading. It's almost a psychological trade. If I'm paying more, I should at least get something better. But inflation isn't a fair transaction. You can't force it to give you equal value back by spending more. I've observed people who stay financially stable during rising prices. They clearly separate two things. First, unavoidable cost increases. Second, voluntary lifestyle upgrades. They accept the first. They delay the second, not because they're cheap, but because they understand that in unstable environments, maintaining your current standard matters more than raising it. Upgrading during inflation may make you feel like you're not falling behind, but in reality, it tightens your cash flow. And when cash flow tightens, your stress level rises with it. Idea 6. Inflation makes you feel out of control. And when you feel out of control, you're more likely to abandon discipline. I've noticed something subtle. When prices constantly shift, many people begin to feel like their efforts to control money are pointless. They used to have clear budgets, they tracked spending closely, they set specific savings goals. Then prices rise, and they start saying, well, nothing is accurate anymore. Forget it. I'm tired of calculating everything. Most people don't realize that when the environment becomes unpredictable, the brain tends to abandon systems instead of adjusting them. Not because they lack discipline, but because they feel like their effort no longer produces the same results. Here's a common example. You used to save $200 a month consistently. Now, because living costs increased, you can only save $120. You look at that lower number and think, what's the point? And slowly you start spending more freely. What's interesting is the problem isn't saving less. The problem is equating not hitting the old number with it's no longer meaningful. In high-price environments, maintaining the system matters more than maintaining the number. People who manage money well during inflation don't necessarily hit their old targets. They adjust the target, but they don't abandon the system. They may save less, but they don't stop saving. They may reduce investments, but they don't liquidate everything because they understand something important. Inflation changes outcomes. It shouldn't change your principles. When you keep your principles, your sense of control slowly returns. And when control returns, spending stops being driven by mood. Idea 7. Rising prices make you feel like you're falling behind. And that feeling is more expensive than inflation itself. I've noticed something many people don't say out loud. When prices go up, it's not just living costs that rise. Social comparison rises too. You see others still dining out, still buying new things, still traveling, while you feel like you have to calculate every purchase. And quietly, a thought appears. I'm struggling more than before. Most people don't realize that feeling of falling behind is more dangerous than inflation itself, because it hits self-worth. And when self-worth feels threatened, spending becomes a way to prove something, not to others, but to yourself. To reassure yourself that I'm still doing fine. Here's a simple example. You know you should cut back on eating out. But when your friends continue their usual lifestyle, you feel like reducing yours means you're weaker, so you keep spending at the same level, even though internally you feel tension. Inflation doesn't make everyone poor at the same time, but it makes people insecure about their position. And when people feel insecure about their status, they spend to preserve a familiar image. Those who manage money well during inflation share one trait. They clearly separate their self-worth and their current spending level. They understand that adjusting spending is not a downgrade. It's an intelligent response to changing conditions. Many people try to preserve an old financial image in a new economic environment. The difference isn't income, it's the ability to adapt without feeling diminished. And that's a powerful psychological skill. Idea 8. When prices rise, it's easy to confuse treating yourself with soothing pressure. I've noticed something very subtle. During high price periods, people often tell me, "Everything feels stressful right now. I deserve a little treat." That sounds reasonable, but the line between rewarding yourself and relieving pressure is thin. Most people don't realize that when external stress builds, the brain looks for quick relief, a new purchase, a nicer than usual meal, an unplanned expense. Not because you lack financial control, but because you want emotional control. Here's a very normal scenario. You just paid several higher than expected bills. You feel a small wave of frustration, and then you tell yourself, well, if I'm already spending this much, I might as well get something I actually enjoy. What's interesting is the treat usually isn't huge, but it repeats, and each repetition strengthens a psychological loop. Stress to spending to temporary relief. The problem is the relief fades, but the total spending doesn't. People who manage money well during inflation don't avoid rewards. They just separate two things: planned enjoyment, emotional reaction. If they want to treat themselves, they decide ahead of time, not immediately after feeling pressure. That pause between emotion and action is what protects their finances. Because during inflation, impulsive spending doesn't come from greed. It comes from accumulated stress and fatigue. And if you don't recognize that, you'll think you're just enjoying life, when in reality you're using money to calm pressure. Idea 9. Inflation makes you think you need a big solution. But what saves you is something small. I've noticed a common reaction when prices rise sharply. People look for a solution big enough to fight it. They want to change jobs immediately, invest aggressively, slash all discretionary spending overnight, or completely overhaul their lifestyle in a few weeks. Most people don't realize that when the external environment feels big and threatening, the brain wants an equally big action. But large changes are rarely sustainable. Here's a common example. After seeing spending increase for several months in a row, you decide, starting next month, I'm not eating out at all. Week 1, strong motivation. Week 2, fatigue. Week 3, frustration. Week 4, back to old habits. It's not that you lack discipline. You're trying to solve a long-term issue with a short-term extreme response. People who manage money well during inflation usually do the opposite. They don't change dramatically. They change slightly, but consistently. They reduce one small recurring expense. They delay one large decision. They protect one key habit from being disrupted. They understand inflation is a prolonged process. And prolonged processes can't be solved with explosive reactions. What's interesting is that in unstable environments, consistency creates safety, not dramatic action. Big moves create instant feelings of control. Small habits create real control. Money doesn't grow from extreme months. It grows from stable ones. Idea 10. The people who keep their money during inflation aren't the ones who earn more. They're the ones who stay calm longer. After years of observing financial behavior, I've realized something. During rising price periods, the financial gap between people doesn't widen because of income. It widens because of reaction. Some people maintain stable finances even with unchanged income. Others earn more but constantly feel behind. The difference lies in something invisible, the ability to tolerate uncertainty without reacting impulsively. Most people don't realize inflation is a psychological test. Rising prices don't just test your wallet, they test your ability to accept change, adjust expectations, maintain systems, avoid comparison, resist emotional reactions. Calm people aren't people who don't feel pressure. They see prices rising too. They feel the stress too, but they don't let emotion override principle. When living costs rise, a reactive person either cuts too aggressively out of panic or gives up because everything is too expensive anyway. A calm person adjusts a few variables, keeps the rest stable, observes longer before making big moves. They understand finances don't need to be perfect every month. They need to be stable over years. What's interesting is when you stay calm long enough, you begin to see inflation differently. It's no longer something you fight. It's a condition you adapt to. And adaptation isn't weakness. It's a very practical form of intelligence. If you've ever spent to relieve pressure, compared poorly when prices rose, abandoned your system because the numbers changed, or tried to make a big move to fight inflation, you're not wrong. You're reacting the way most people do, but starting today, you can try something different. You don't need to change everything. Just choose one small adjustment from this video. Keep it steady for 3 months. No extremes, no emotional swings, no proving anything to anyone. Money doesn't stay with the smartest person. It stays with the most patient one. If this helped you see money more calmly, hit like and subscribe. We'll keep talking about money in a way that reduces pressure, but still goes deep enough to change how you see it. I'll see you in the next video.